Okay, I thought I'd start with two preliminary comments. Edward was a person who was sure that capitalism, particularly through the modern credit system, which he strongly repeated over and over again, had mastered the problem of crises, one of his strongest arguments. You couldn't build on a theory of revolution when capitalism hit a crisis, because capitalism had figured out how to manage crises, and the credit system was one of the key mechanisms. Looking back at 2008, I don't think we have to spend a lot of time on this particular sort of argument. He said this before the credit collapse that drove 1929, and obviously the one that just has blown the capitalist world away in recent years. Likewise, Rosa Luxemburg, in her answer, worrying very seriously about what would happen to a genuine Marxist socialist party, which the German party was at that time, if his ideas could prevail, if it became a party of reform without revolutionary commitments and content, where could it end up? It's hard not to see the total self-destruction of the Greek Socialist Party over recent years, and the complete self-destruction of the French Socialist Party that is going on as we speak, and not see some sort of connection between what she worried about and what indeed has come to pass. And then one other preliminary comment of a personal nature. I was lucky enough in my life that my father was a product of the German socialist movement, and that his father, that is my grandfather, was the first social democrat to become Bürgermeister, which is equivalent to mayor, of a small West German town. And one of the family stories repeated countlessly was a story my father used to tell of his first experience, political experience in his life. He believed he was between 3.5 and 4 years of age. And he was sitting on his father, that is my grandfather's shoulder, who led the people of Bensheim in Germany, this little city in the west, to the central square area for one of the great moments of his life as the political leader of this town, which was the arrival of that's how his father talked to him, the greatest orator anyone had ever heard. It was the arrival in Bensheim of Rosa Luxemburg to give a speech, which tells you that there are complicated linkages that bring you from all of that to this moment here. Okay, so Rosa Luxemburg has always been a very important person in my own life and in my own thinking. So to pick up from what Sandra said, and that's going to be my comment for today, she was very clear. Reformism without a revolutionary component integrated into it is as dead-end a political project as the reverse, a revolutionary commitment that does not understand the centrality of participating in, building from, mobilizing around reform. The trick has never really been reform or revolution. I believe her choice of that title had a good deal of irony in it. It was really more, how do you understand the difference between a reform period and a reform that has revolutionary content or implications or matches to a revolutionary project? And that the real struggle has always been that. How do you make the struggles for reform have revolutionary implications, content, and meaning? Now, I could talk abstractly about her, but I don't want to. I would like to imagine that what she would have wanted us to do is to apply what she had to teach us to the current situation. And in the few minutes I have left, I would like to try to do that. But I do want to underscore before I do the enormous power and passion that Rosa Luxemburg brought to almost everything she wrote is another reason why Chris Hedges' wonderful idea to have a series of talks about the great classics, in the hope that all of you and everyone who hears or sees this program this evening will read them. That's the point. to get you interested, excited, to see that there may be something for you to pull out of this literature that can help the movement in this country today. Mr. Sanders talks about a political revolution. And it's clear he chose that word, and he makes a big deal of that word, so it's being put back on the agenda just as his campaign is putting socialism back into the language of American politics, from which it was banished for half a century. So it's very timely, and I think Rosa Luxemburg, as much as Marx and Thom and the others we hope will be talking about in the months and years to come, are literature that we can only urge you in every possible way to avail yourselves of. So I'm going to give you 3 examples, I think, of struggles for reform that could have a revolutionary content. They don't, of course, have to. Struggles for reform can either be with or without revolutionary content, revolutionary components, revolutionary implications. Let's begin with one I'm sure you all know about. There is a struggle for higher wages in the United States, the fight for $15 an hour as a minimum for all kinds of workers, but particularly in the fast food, retail, and other industries where they've been so badly underpaid. Is that an effort at reform? Of course it is. Is it an effort of reform that Rosa Luxemburg would endorse? No question about it. Of course she would. But she would insist on a revolutionary component for it. And what might that be? Well, there are many possibilities. I'm just going to offer you one so that the flavor of what I think she's after can be gotten across. It's one thing for workers to demand a higher wage for the work that they do. It's another thing for workers to say, what in the world is this system in which we have to beg periodically for a living wage from people who take a long time figuring out whether they like to do it or not? If you take a lot of effort and a lot of sacrifice, you get them to do it, and then if you're reasonably normal in terms of your history, 3 years later, you lose it again. And you can start the whole thing over, except with fewer people, because they're not going to struggle the way they did the first time if all they're going to get is a temporary improvement in their condition, because the ultimate situation they face hasn't been transformed. So could you struggle for 15 an hour and say, yes, we are struggling for 15 an hour, but we're fundamentally struggling so that these enterprises are ours, and we will democratically and collectively decide who gets paid, how much, when, and where. And we do all know that if everybody together decided in each enterprise who got paid what, there wouldn't be some people getting $45 million a year and other people getting closer to $4,500. We wouldn't do that. Almost nobody would do that. Only capitalism does that. Second example. We fight very hard, many of you in this room I know, fight very hard for a transformation of the environmental damage that is being done by a rapacious capitalist system. And as I think Rosa would do, let me drive home how and why it's capitalism. I could make an experiment with all of you, which I'm sure many of you would enjoy. I could ask you all, and I do this with my students, I do the idea of it, I don't do the actuality. I have to stress that, otherwise I'll get fired. I could ask you to all stand up, take off all your clothes, you can see where this is going, and then come up, each of you one by one, for many of you this will be your worst nightmare, and you'd come up here naked, and on one side of the room here I'd ask you to put all the clothes you're wearing that were made in the United States, and on the other side I'd put all the clothing that was made someplace else. And all of you know in advance, even though the experiment would be fun, that one pile would be very high and the other pile would be very low. We don't make clothing in the United States anymore, not much. It's made tens, thousands or tens of thousands of miles away. Why was that done? You all know. That was done to make more money. The people who make clothing knew that they could do at least 2 things in Asia or Africa or Latin America, wherever they went. They could pay much lower wages, and they could either bribe or not even have to bribe their way out of ecological limits on what they spewed into the air and water. So they went to make more money. Nothing else made them move. And therefore, the world you and I live in, we breathe the air, we work the water, is now being polluted on a scale we've never seen before, because instead of our shirts and socks and shoes being made 50 miles away and brought by a truck, they are 10,000 miles away, and they require steamships, et cetera, to travel the 10,000 miles, dumping every kind of crap there is into the air and the water, fouling the atmosphere, damaging the fisheries of the world in all the ways that many of you know. And that's a result of a capitalist system that makes profit the driver of the decisions about investments. Now, what are you going to do about that? You could struggle. It's a good reformist struggle to limit such things. Pass laws that govern what you can spew into the air and what you can dump in the ocean, etc. And we're doing all of that. Those are good reformist struggles. But once again, they have this sad quality. We're begging. We're begging politicians, mostly in the debt of the people we're faced with, who will take a long time to do any of this. We all know that. We're watching that. We're living in it. And when finally they do it, they'll do the minimum they can get away with. And if we can get beyond that, they will then immediately, upon the passage of the law, begin to evade it. When they're a bit stronger, weaken it. And when they're a little stronger, get rid of it so we can start again. What would a revolutionary content be? Again, there are many, but I'm going to stay with the one I like. Imagine enterprises where the decisions about what they produce, how they produce, and where they produce are made democratically and collectively by all the workers. How many clothing factories in America would have had their workers vote peacefully and quietly in a democratic way to destroy their own jobs, destroy their own communities, and have no income in order that the company could go far away? Not too many. Like, I don't know, I'd give a rough guess. As I'm an economist, we're supposed to make guesses like that. I'd guess sort of none. And that would have made quite a difference. And maybe there's a way to connect the struggle about ecology to the struggle for a different organization of work in the enterprises that produce the goods and services we need as a society to live on. Maybe that's a better way to transform the situation so that we're not always struggling hard and long for a reform that is insecure from the day it's won because of a system that can undo it. We're living the life here in the United States, for those of you who haven't figured it out already, which I'm sure most of you have. We've lived the last 50 years in the systematic undoing of the most ambitious set of reforms ever imposed on capitalism. The reforms of the New Deal. Public employment, a real minimum wage that meant something, a real unemployment program, a real social security system that meant what it said, social security. All of that has been undone. The reforms are insecure, and they're insecure because in capitalism, the people who own the enterprises keep in their hands that ownership and that control, and that gives them the incentive and the resources to undo the reforms as soon and as fast as they're won. Third example, especially because of the Sanders phenomenon that you're all following these days, and rightly so. The notion of a third party, an alternative party, a new political formation, whatever you call it, is on the minds of millions of Americans as they watch what's going on and as they participate. And that is an enormous step forward in this country's political maturation. Now, what would a new independent political party, which for all we know may be closer than we thought it might be, what would it do? What would it learn from Rosa Luxemburg? To demand all the reforms we've been talking about? Or to go beyond that, to have a revolutionary commitment? Imagine with me, because that's what this is about, applying the work of a thinker like Rosa Luxemburg. Imagine with me a political party that was for all the reforms, $15 an hour, protecting of the environment, all of it. But that also said crystal clearly, we are not a party of capitalism. We are not the Republican Party, we're not the Democratic Party, We're not any of the parties whose very assumptions and presumptions and everything they say and do is that this is the system we have, and this is the system we will have, and this is the system they are pledged to protect. Imagine a party which said, we're not the, we stand for the solution, which is the end of this system and the transformation into a system of organized production of all the goods and services we need, in which every single worker involved is an equal, one vote, one person decision maker about what to produce, how to produce, where to produce, and what to do with the profits that everybody helps to produce in every enterprise. And this is the party that is going to be pushing for the reforms on the way to representing itself as the party for the party of a radical transformation of the organization of production. When I read Rosa Luxemburg, that's the lesson I got. Thank you very much.